when little kids are in bed at night and the room is really, really dark and the wind is blowing and the closet door slowly creaks open, what do? Pull the covers over their heads, right? Why do kids think that'll help? I mean, why is it that somewhere they believe that the evil monkey in their closet or the monster under their bed cannot breach blankets? Is there some unwritten law that I don't know about that monsters and ghoulies and things like that have a horrible allergy to cotton and polyester? I don't know. But we innately have that belief as little children and on up that if we do not see it, we do not have to believe it. Human beings really are the only animals that believe this. And if you're thinking, by the way, what about the ostriches, who bury their heads in the sand? That's a fallacy. Ostriches dig their nests with their beaks, and sometimes it looks like they're burying their heads in the sand, but they don't really. Herein is the zoological lesson. And now on to theology. The reason we pull those covers over our heads is because we believe that if we don't see what frightens us, we can disbelieve that it exists. I mean, think about the scary movie. When you're watching the scary movie and you do what during the scary part? You cover your eyes, right? Neil used to hate the sounds also, so he had this maneuver where he could plug his ears and cover his eyes at the same time. We used to have to shake him to let him know when it was over so he could watch the rest of the movie. It just is easier to disbelieve if we don't see it. Because seeing is indeed believing. And then if we don't see it, we can deny it. And that's what we do with death so often. 150 years ago when a loved one died, usually he died at home. And the family washed him and dressed him and laid him out on the dining room table. And that's where the wake was. So it was kind of unavoidable. You couldn't really deny Grandpa was dead when he's lying dead on the dining room table. But of course, today we're much more enlightened people, and we die in institutions, and funeral homes come in the back door and up the service elevator and whisk in and zip us up into a nice clean bag and take us to the funeral home and wash us and dress us and bring in hairdressers to do our hair. How'd you like that job? And then when you come to the wake, what do people say? Oh, he looks wonderful. I always want to say, no, he really looks dead. I knew him and he never looked like that. He looks a lot better than he used to look, really. But that's what we do. And it's just like pulling the covers over our heads. We can just pretend that there is no such thing as death. Well, we had an interesting denial last week, didn't we? The story of Thomas, poor doubting Thomas. He gets nailed all the time. But he was pulling the covers over his head. He would not believe that that was Jesus unless he saw the holes in his hands and the hole in his side. But he wasn't trying to deny death. I mean, he couldn't deny death. He saw Jesus die on the cross. There was no way to deny that. So what, I wonder, was his denial about? I think his denial was not about death, but of the resurrection. You see, that ties in to our denial of death. It's just too much to hope for, this whole business of the resurrection. I mean, think if you're one of Jesus' disciples and all the things they had gone through over the last 4 years, and then finally they end up with their master dying on a cross. Well, the only good thing about Jesus' crucifixion and death was that it was finally over. And they could all just go back to work, go back to fishing. But now here's Jesus standing in the upper room with the holes in his hands, the holes in his side, and it's like it's starting all over again. No, Thomas was done with it. He wanted to grieve and move on and go back to work. But Seeing is believing, right? He couldn't deny those holes in his hands and in his side. Jesus was definitely back from the dead. And that elicited his response, "My Lord and my God." One of the most important moments in the Bible. See, if we do not believe in the resurrection, then death is the end for us. We can dress it up and we can make it more palatable. We can make people look like they're just sleeping. But without the resurrection, death is the final curtain. And I'm telling you, there are some people who seem to want that. They like the finality of death, so that everything can be clean and neatly packaged and tied up and done. But see, the reality is that life is never done for us. Jesus appeared to Thomas, to the fishermen in today's gospel, later on to St. Paul on the road, finally to St. John in our reading from Revelation today while he was on the island of Patmos, to make absolutely sure that everyone knew that the crucified Jesus was not dead. So death is not the end. There is no end. There are just the transitions from this life to the next life for all of God's people. St. Paul, in our reading from Acts today, he was pretty terrified of the idea of a resurrected Lord. He had been actively persecuting Jesus' followers. He had been there to watch Stephen get stoned to death. And he was afraid that if Jesus was alive, he was in grave trouble. No pun intended. Did God blind him? I don't think so. I think he was so terrified that the Lord was alive, I think he might have suffered what we call today hysterical blindness. The brain of a person who is frightened enough, who has no covers to pull over his head, can literally turn off sight. St. Paul was soon to learn, though, through Ananias, that he had no reason to fear Jesus. He had no reason, though he thought he was dead, to fear the fact that he was quite alive, because Jesus only wanted to give him a gift. He wanted to give him the gift of eternal life. Have you ever been to a funeral where everyone talks about how swell the deceased person was? They go on and on and on about what a great guy he was. They're trying to pull the covers up over their heads, trying to deny not really death, but eternal life. They believe that if they talk enough about what a swell guy he was and about how his memory will live on through us, they don't have to acknowledge something. And that is that all the stuff that we do in this life isn't really all that important. Hey, I don't care if the dead guy was the walking embodiment of St. Francis and Mother Teresa combined. Guess what? He was still a poor, miserable sinner. And now that he is dead, only now is his life getting really good. I want to stand up at such funerals. I really do. I want to stand up and I want to yell, "So what?" Now you know, see, every time you see me sitting through a eulogy, that's what I'm thinking. So what? Get to the good part. I want to hear about the resurrection. I want to hear about how death loses. How it interrupts us, but it cannot stop us. I want to hear about how we will be with all of our loved ones again and live eternally with them and with Jesus. That's what the resurrection is. The resurrection is the proclamation of real eternal life. But I'll tell you, the resurrection scares people. And it scares people even more than death scares people. Because, see, what if the few short years that we spend on this earth are not really what matters? What if this is just a training ground? What if this is just a staging area? A preparation for when life really begins. Embrace the resurrection. Don't hide from it. Don't let the world pull those covers over your head because the idea of eternal life scares the bejeebers out of them. Because they want to know that their 401k matters. They want to think that their status and their power means something. They are scared to death that their lives of puny earthly accomplishments are meaningless. They're rightly scared. Because the preacher in Ecclesiastes says, hey, it's all vanity. So they just pull the covers over their heads and hide. But seeing is believing. Jesus stood before Thomas. Jesus stood before Paul. Jesus stood before John on Patmos. Jesus stood before Peter and the other fishermen. And not only did they see him, but he provided for them. They were professional fishermen. 153 large fish is a pretty darn good catch for a fishing night. And then he made breakfast for them. And they ate together. Does it ring a bell for you that eating together is connected to Jesus' post-resurrection appearances? Jesus stands before us again today as we receive his body and his blood. He is here again today, reminding us again today that this life that we live is only the staging ground. He gives his body and blood for us to eat and to drink, to remind us that while we are on this earth, he will continue providing everything we need, but especially the spiritual food that we need to survive through this life and into paradise with him. Fling off the blankets that are creeping up over your head and embrace the resurrection. Embrace real life. Embrace eternal life.